Welcome to the Neurodivergent Parenting Podcast. I'm Melissa Cox, and I will be your host. I'm here because, like you, I am trying to make sense of this beautiful mess of neurodivergent family life. Parenting is chaos with brief moments of order, but neurodivergent parenting is chaos on steroids. Each episode, we will sink into real conversations about this journey, not the Pinterest perfect version, but the real one, where we can share strategies that actually work for us, feel seen, heard, and build a community where we genuinely understand each other. So, whether you're listening while pacing your kitchen for the 10th time today, or finally sitting still after everyone else has gone to bed, you're in the right place. Let's figure this out together, one beautifully chaotic moment at a time.
Hi, so I'm Nicola. I have 5 kids. Our oldest is 19, our youngest 12. We are very familiar with ASD, ADHD, this, and this, that, and PDA. I mean, the alphabet,
All of the things.
yeah, are all present and accounted for. So as you can imagine, our household is running on its own terms. And I was very excited to come on and talk to you about, because parenting in a neurodiverse family is, I mean, every parenting experience is different, but it definitely brings
Absolutely.
another layer and dynamic to it, that I'm happy to share about. We do well. Kids are adjusted all in their own way. And I'm happy to maybe give pointers to parents who are just starting on that journey, or who are not even fully immersed in the, hey, I figured this out, I know what's going on, and I know how to handle it, but who
Yeah.
are just struggling all the balls. Personally, I run a business that is focused on moms and self-care, because I mean, we always hear it, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. You can very well pour from an empty cup, but the cost is
Yeah.
so high. And
Absolutely.
if you add a neurodivergent trait to it, the cost is so much higher. And to
Right.
get to a place where, you know, as mom, you are allowed to take care of yourself. You can do it in a way that makes sense to you, that makes sense to all of your family dynamics. So you can then actually respond to your children and be ahead of them, and not putting out fires all day
Oh my
long.
gosh.
Um,
Yeah,
that's the mission that I'm on. So
absolutely.
some of that in as well.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, like everything that you just said is so true. So you and your kids are neurodivergent or okay.
Yes. So I have my official ADHD diagnosis, though I identify more as an ADHD. So there's definitely autistic traits in there. I'm not even going to go
Yeah.
try get the diagnosis. I function too well to be
Yep.
clinically, you know, not functioning to deserve a diagnosis. But I do
Yeah.
have like 4 support people coming on a weekly basis to help me with stuff. If that falls away, our life is not functioning very well. We have a couple kiddos that have official diagnosis, and the rest is like, okay, checking all the check marks. But again, they're supported enough that they're
Yes.
functioning well enough at school. And if you
Yeah.
function well at school, you don't, it's really hard to get an official diagnosis. And honestly, sometimes, like, let's say one of our kids needed that extra support, so we were
Yeah.
pursuing the diagnosis, he got the support, it really was helpful. We have one of them, he's doing okay. Like, I mean, he's checking all the boxes, but
Yep.
there's no benefit in him getting the official diagnosis, at least at this point. So we haven't
Yeah.
pursued it. If that might become necessary at another point, we will absolutely get him
Yeah.
more outside help, as he needs it.
That's so true. Like sometimes like I am pursuing an official diagnosis for one of my kids more so than the others because I mean, we had so many school troubles here in the States that I pulled them out and I am homeschooling them because it was just even the supports that they were legally required to provide, they were not providing. And it just sometimes we just make the best choice for like our particular family and like, okay, well, this isn't working, so let me figure out how to work my life around and pull my kids out so that we can do things differently.
Yeah, and it is such a blessing that you get to do that. In Germany, it is not legal to homeschool.
Oh
So
my goodness.
I have to work with the system that is
Yeah.
given. And some teachers are amazing, and
Yep.
very open and understanding and educated, though they are bound by the structure that they're functioning in. And some some have inflicted some trauma that could have been
Yeah.
avoided, but there was no option short of moving, which we're finally
Yeah.
in the stages of planning for that, but our oldest is through school, and he literally just made it through school, and
Yeah.
now he has to work through, figuring out how to heal all that, because we did not have the option to pull them out. And not saying that it's always the best, but it's, on a
Yeah.
scale, it's still better than.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are benefits and like difficulties with everything because I mean, if I was up there every single day anyway with
Yeah.
having to, talk to people about the things that they should be trained in and should be aware of and having to explain to them like this is why they are acting this way or this is why they're doing that. And um yeah, I was unable to function as a human being, like as an adult, because I was up there every day, right? But also, I know that there are plenty of parents, even here in the States, who can't because of financial reasons or just logistics. Having my kids at home all the day is definitely very different than if I had, several hours every single day to go run around and do whatever it is that I need to do. Even if I was working from home, it would still be completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and that's where then you do the cost analysis. Like,
Yep.
bringing them home is, might be really better for the kid, but if it means for you as the
Yep.
main caretaker that it drains you of all the resources available to you, then is there
Yeah.
other support you can bring in? Are there other people that
Yes.
can, is you have to go down the list, but it's a whole thing, and it's always a micro
It's
decision. There's no
yeah.
one size fits all. There's not even, you might pull them out, and then 2 years down the road, dynamics shift and change, and
Yep.
starting the process all over again. And
Yeah,
it's
we've done the back and forth a lot where I pull them out and then they're like, well, I kind of miss having, more access to friends and stuff because we do plenty of social things, but there's a difference between being there every single day with their friends every single day versus intentionally making, play dates and going to see people and I don't know. It's just different. It's all just different choices. And like none of them are better or worse. It's just what's working right now. That is so hard for me sometimes as a neurodivergent person is deciding what is working right now, not what worked in the past, not what theoretically should work, but what is actually working at this moment.
you're hitting on this so important dynamic of what is working. I think especially growing up with how systems are, the word should is so strong, right? Even if no
Yep.
one says it to you, that what happens in the
Yep.
background, it's like, man, I really should be able to do this. And
Because it
no,
seems like everybody else is able to.
right? And we can't even look behind the scenes. Maybe they're not, but it sure
Yeah,
feels like,
it
everybody's
looks like it.
better. And I think that's the biggest work we as moms get to do, is to work through, there's no should.
Yeah.
It's good with that, and it's what it is. So how can we make it work?
Yeah.
What can we do to make it work right now for you? And I have to tell myself that, because
Yeah.
that's where 6 nights sometimes comes through. It's like, oh, I found the system. Like this is how it's going to work. And I want it to work forever and ever. And
Yeah.
usually it works for about 3 months and then it falls
Yep.
apart. And then I have to reevaluate and find some other shift so it can still function. But yeah, telling moms that there's no guilt and there's no shame in asking for help and recognizing I am limited. I have limited patience. I have limited energy, and it's fine. There's so many ways to support that is a huge step, and so not talked about, and so not supported on a grander scheme. I think within our neurodiverse community, it's very much understood, and accepted, but that's a small portion of.
Well, I mean, because so much, I know, like for Americans, especially, like the ideology of being independent, being able to do everything yourself, being able to not have to ask for help. Those are very like predominant traits in America. I know like, different cultures treat that differently, but it just depends on what you grew up with. And the should thing, like I always tell people, don't should on yourself, because it's just not helpful, right? It's getting stuck in those ideas of what other people are doing isn't very helpful. And okay, so if it's not working for us, then it doesn't matter what other people are doing.
Right. Yeah, I really try to get into permission granted. You need to run your dishwasher twice half empty, permission granted, run it. You need to have a box at the door with all your shoes in wild arrangement, permission granted. Do what works for you. There's really no, caveat, have your kids fed somehow.
Somehow,
whatever they eat, which is the list is sometimes very small to begin with.
Yeah.
Have them clean to a degree, and even that I know is the struggle.
Yeah, depends on the day.
And provide as stable of a home as possible. And with stable, I don't mean you have the same routines every day, though some kids really, really do well on that. But have a place where they feel safe.
Yeah.
Where they can come home and know they're accepted. And because it's hard enough as is, even with all that. Like, I mean, we have multiple kids, right? So there's 5 of them, and their needs are sometimes opposite of what the other one needs. And so no matter what you do, someone loses. And that's in a very loving, accepting, well-established, well-rounded home. It just happens. So life is hard enough as is. So if you can provide those things, the rest are details.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah, that one comes up so often with my clients is how do you balance your needs, but also like just sometimes just trying to balance your kids' needs and polar opposite needs, right? Like you said, like I have a sensory seeker and a sensory avoider. So how do you deal with that?
It's unsatisfactory, to be honest, because I have to address both of them. And they're at an age now where I can, when they're 3 and 4, there's no point in verbalizing them. So at that point, I would literally create separate physical spaces for them to express what they need. Now that they're older and we can have conversations, I lay it out, and it's like, I know you need to move. I know you can't sit still right now. And can we find a place where you can do that without distracting others? And then I address the other one and say, I know you need quiet right now to focus on your thing. Is it possible for you to do that somewhere else? Or is it possible for you to maybe live with the distraction for a certain amount of time? Can we put a time? And it's every time it's a conversation, because
Yeah.
again, even if you found, hey, today it really worked that for 10 minutes you were running and you were being quiet and then we separated, that doesn't mean that tomorrow that same solution will hit the sweet spot the same way. And
Yeah.
teaching them to advocate for themselves, tune in, and it's like, hey, what do I actually need right now other than just wildly functioning?
Yeah.
And becoming aware of I need, and which is for teenagers, that's a whole lesson to begin with, right? Opening their eyes and it's like, there's other people in my vicinity, what do they need, and become sensitized to that, and then
Yeah.
find a solution together, which sometimes is a beautiful conversation.
Yeah.
Sometimes, it's not, because they're also teenagers and they do
Yeah.
not have that ability to look
Yes.
beyond this. They're very much toddlers in that way.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of work still as parents to help them. And if I'm dysregulated at that point
Yep.
myself, there's no conversation happening. So
Yeah.
my biggest work as a parent always is, I need to come from as a regulated place as possible. And
Yeah.
so my kids have learned that to pick up on cues, and they will send me to take a nap if I'm snappy.
Yep.
I'm also able to say, hey guys, I need 10 minutes. I've been doing all this. I need 10 minutes in my office. I'll have a coffee. Can we talk it afterwards? And because they're
Mm-hmm.
older, it is possible. Now, when they're younger,
Yeah.
you can't tell a 3-year-old, just give me 20 minutes, right? So it's you approach it a little differently, and you
Yeah.
really have to be on top of yourself, because you don't have that buffer that I now get to have with my older ones. But there's strategies to do that, for sure.
Yeah. I feel like for at least like for my younger kids, so I have three and I have an 11-year-old, a 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old.
Okay.
And so I'm like just coming out of the constant sort of like mediation and constant preempting, right? I have to like for so many of their like especially sensory needs and just like attention and like the amount of attention and affection that they need, or attention to be able to listen to them info dump at me, or to give them what they need, right? I have to preempt. I have to like make sure that I am aware of how much I'm like, hey, so I haven't sat down and asked them recently, like today, about what they want to tell me about, right? So it's like, otherwise, that is going to come up later at a less convenient time. So
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
I'm like trying to fill their bucket, and this is not perfect. This is never perfect, but I'm trying to do my best to fill their cup
Yeah.
before it gets to the point where like they are in a less functional version of trying to get that
Mhm.
need met.
Yeah. Yes. It's a lot of work, but you're right. The knowing that that's a good strategy to be, what you were saying, to
Yeah.
fill their cups before they become completely
Yeah.
dysregulated and falling apart. So valuable. But that also means before you can do that, you need to be at a point
Yep.
where your cup has been at least halfway filled, like a little bit of
Yes.
crinkles, so you can be in a space to do that. And
Yep.
mornings usually, or earlier of the day, easier than come 4 o'clock, because then it just
It's
doesn't happen
witching
anymore.
hour. It's
Yeah.
for 5, 6, usually. So we have a sort of because we homeschool, I'm able to adjust to their biological clocks, because one of my sensory seeker is also a night owl, and he just wants to stay up so late, and I've gotten him to where he'll go to bed at a reasonable hour, but
Mhm.
still it's later than the other two, right? So the other two are like, I'm tired at 8 o'clock, and they're like, my body wants to go to sleep,
Yeah.
but he wants to stay up until if he could, he would stay up until 2 a.m. Honestly, I don't. At some point, he'll be a teenager and he will have his own room and he can set his own schedule as long as he's, capable of functioning. But it's that balance. And um see, this is how ADHD conversations start, because I
Yeah.
can't remember where I began.
Well, filling your own cup and how
Yes.
earlier parts of the days are a little easier than the witching hour, which can
Yeah.
extend from 4 to, it sounds like 8, 9 o'clock for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. 8 and 9 o'clock are like, I am done. I am wiped. I'm like, I need us to be quiet. I need us to like stop talking and we need to go to sleep. So we read and we try to get everybody to like lay down, and I just kind of let him wander around and like walk as I'm reading so that he can get those wiggles out. And but it's just whatever works right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll always be in that whatever works.
Yeah.
And they'll be, I mean, I guess as people in
Yeah.
general, especially, yeah, I have one that is very sensory seeking, having, the dysregulated sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and the always having to be in movement. And he's gotten to a point where he recognizes that about himself, so he can help
Yeah.
himself. But I don't think that'll ever change. That's
I think
just,
that's just who they are sometimes, you know? We're
and
just different people. I do a lot of explaining to my kids too that when they are having struggles between themselves, I'm like, you are different people. Like you want this and they want this, and that's not always going to match up. Sometimes we have to practice removing ourselves from the situation, even when we think we're right, even when we think that we have been wronged. Like, we still have to remove ourselves because we can't change those people, even our brothers and sisters. Like, we can't do that.
Yeah, it is such a hard lesson to learn. I mean, I think for people in general, that's a hard
Yeah.
lesson to learn. But being so intentional with your like 8-year-old,
Yeah.
you are right, and you have all the rights to feel what you're feeling right now.
Yeah.
But for this moment, I need you to remove yourself. And then when everybody is in a better space, let's talk about it. Let's find some better solutions. But right now, you need to, and it's hard. It's hard to learn that, hard to teach that. And because I always feel like you can watch how it's just not a perfect world, right? Like they're all kind of, you're always chipping away a little bit at this doesn't work this way right now, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I think that's just the sort of heartbreak of raising kids too, is like helping them understand that unfortunately the world is not perfect and some people are going to be cruel. Some people are going to be really unkind and difficult to work with or to just be around. And we just have to, like you said, with the solid foundations in the home, is that's the hope, is like that we have some sort of solid foundation that they can come back to, so that whenever they do face those things outside of us, outside of our home, that they know that they are still loved and they know that they are still cared for in some space.
Yeah. And that teaches them a measure of what kind of people they should surround themselves with later on in life, because you always choose your circle. And the world might be cruel, but the people right around you don't necessarily have to be. So if you at least have experienced how that should feel like, or could feel like, at least it gives me the hope that they will do well. And now that I have oldest, I have the advantage of seeing that our oldest moved out. Our next oldest, the 17-year-old, is on the verge of that. And but I can see how they are, just glimpses, right?
Yeah.
On the outside world and how they're being perceived. And we've been getting really, really positive feedback about just that they're cool people, that they're kind, that they're considerate, that they're liked, you know, in whatever circle they're
Yeah.
at. But it feels good that to know that all those years of laying foundations and of, you know, doing
Yeah.
the preemptive stuff and of mediating and of teaching and all that can lead to a really beautiful outcome,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, because I mean, we know that there's going to be stuff that we can't control and they can't control, but at least if they have that, it is. I always love talking to people with slightly older kids because it reminds me that there's hope, that there's like on the really hard days, because some days are just really hard. And I mean, I talk to parents about that a lot of like, you're not doing anything wrong. It's just
It's
really
exhausting.
hard. Like,
It's
if you're
hard.
doing things that are unhelpful, then we will talk about that. But most of the time, you're doing all the things. It's
Mhm.
just really hard.
Yeah, it just is. It just is a lot of work. Um, yeah, parenting, and that's where, you know, where it is when you say parenting is hard. It's not because that kids are obstinate or, you know, all that. It's just it is truly a lot of work. Personally here first, and then working with people and always
Mhm.
being on top and being patient and teaching and dealing
Yeah.
with little people who just, you know, I don't have the tools to self-regulate and have their emotions out on the floor, you know, even if it's in a supermarket, they don't care. it's it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And especially when they're really little and you don't even get sleep yet, then, you know, you
Yeah.
add that layer of physicalness to it that that is just not being seen. Parenting, raising children is work that is not being seen. You know, it feels like, well, you have a kid, so, you know, keep him alive, which, right, like sometimes that's our message.
Obviously.
Okay, we kept him alive, we're doing good. But
Yeah.
it's like there's no appreciation to how much goes into day in day out, not
Yeah.
just carting them to school and to their extracurriculars and blah blah blah. You know, the whole academic side has been very, very pushed very hard,
Yes.
but actually raising a human being is so much more than teaching them how to play seven
Yeah.
instruments and getting them in, you know, 25 different sports. There's so much more to it. Like those are extras on top in our book anyways.
Yeah, there's a lot of unlearning that goes on in parenting too,
Oh God.
because I mean, a lot of us grew up, a lot of us who realize, you know, as adults, often, I talked to a few people who got diagnosed when they were kids, but a lot of us were diagnosed as adults because for so many women, we were very high maskers
Yeah.
and we didn't or we our special interests tended to be things that were socially acceptable for women to be or girls to be interested in. So we were just the chatty Cathy in the classroom, or we were the girl who was really into horses, or
Right.
whatever thing it is that was fine, and we were just a little odd, right? Except that we were struggling deeply inside. Like we were struggling with all of the social things, and we probably had some issues with bullying at some point. Um, but so much of raising kids for me and a lot of people is reparenting ourselves
Yes.
to understand that, like, the things that we did in childhood, like, we're not broken. Like, we were not broken. We were just completely different than what society expected from us.
Yeah. Yeah. I do remember the first, I don't know, 5 years maybe was a lot of reparenting, like evaluate, like minor example, how quickly am I to say no to something?
Yeah.
And then when I started examining, it's like, why did I just say no to that? It's like, someone wanted to sit on the kitchen counter, and that was a big no in our house. Like, you don't sit on the
Yeah.
kitchen counter. And then so no one sat on our kitchen counter. And then I realized, wait, I'm repeating this because I hadn't actually looked at this no and decided, is that something that applies to me?
Yeah, is that something I actually care about? I don't know.
Right. Like just asking the question. I was like, okay, I think I don't care as long as they're safe and as long as there's no food, like with a few,
Yeah,
boundaries around it. But no, no, yeah, sure you can. But it took, layer by layer by layer. There were so many opportunities to re-examine my own responses and see where they came from. And if that was something I actually wanted to choose, or if that's something that just came from, well, that's how I was brought up. So
yeah.
that's how it is. And recognizing that nothing is, that's how it is. But it's a choice
Oh,
I get to cultivate.
I think like so talking about that, like it makes me think of this I think it was like a Tumblr thread that I read at some point, but it was basically saying how recipes evolve over time.
Yeah.
And it was this family, like this person who learned how to make a roast, and every time they made a roast, they cut it down. You've read this one, right? Like
Yeah.
they cut it down and they didn't know why, but
That's how
that's just how they did it until like I think their spouse asked one day, like, why do you always cut it? And they're like, I don't know. That's just how my mother and my grandmother always did it. And then they go back and ask the grandmother, and they're like, why did you always cut it down? Oh, well, that was the size of the roast pan that I had, so I had to cut it down. It's like, so like there could be no good reason
yes.
that you do things, but because that is the way that you were raised, you think, oh, well, this is just how we do it until you are forced to re-examine that.
Yeah. And having little kids in the house, I mean, that not forces, but it gives you so many opportunities to
Yeah.
re-examine so much. It's the greatest self-development program you can ever
Yeah.
enter if you are willing to do the
Yep.
work and do that. Because I remember when my second daughter was born and she was all her emotions, whether happy or bad, they were always out there. So she was a very,
Yeah.
very happy child, but she was also a very, very upset child.
Yep.
And recognizing in that mirror is like, because my love didn't change. It might have been frustrating sometimes, but it wasn't, I wish she'd be different, because she just was that way. But then recognizing, wow, well, if she gets to be that way, maybe I get to. And it
Yeah.
was so healing to extend that to myself. I have a
Oh my
place
goodness.
in this world. I get to exist with all my everything and all that I am, because
Yeah.
I get to extend that to her so naturally, right? I mean, a mother's love,
Hmm.
if it's most of the time, it comes very generously.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can extend that to myself. And that was a beautiful lesson to have
Mm.
learned. And all the kids benefited from it, I think, because I changed as a person.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like the hardest thing about the first kid, right? Is so often the first kid is the training ground for a lot of our stuff.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot more struggles with school stuff, with
Mm.
all of the meltdowns from my first kid, and especially because my first kid is a girl, um, we had we had fewer resources because nobody wanted to believe that this kid was struggling because they she masked all day at school and came home and had, massive meltdowns because she'd held it together all day.
Yep. She was done.
And so in front of other people, there was no safety, right? So we put up the mask in front of people that we don't feel safe with, which was everyone except mom and dad.
Mhm.
And then we let down that mask, but that means that home life is incredibly difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't have the understanding of where that's coming from, and you start taking that personally,
Yes.
and you're in such a world of trouble. Like,
Yeah.
and it starts so young, right? I want to
Yeah.
I want to cry when someone says, "Oh, my 8 months old definitely manipulates me," and I'm like,
That's not possible.
it's like I don't even know where to start. It's like it's 8 months old. It's just communicating a need. And you need to figure out what it's communicating and how to meet that need, because it's 8 months old, they're not manipulating. But if you go into parenting with the idea that a
Yeah.
child wants to manipulate you, you already screwed that dynamic, that in the end you're
Yeah.
teaching them to manipulate you. So when they're 7 and 12 and 17, they will have learned how to manipulate a situation, but that's not what they start with. Every
Yeah.
behavior is communication, and you just have to figure out what they need, because they want to be good, and at the bottom of their heart they want
Yeah.
to do well.
They
And
want to be loved. They want to love you,
yeah,
like with very, very few exceptions. There are children, who are born with issues that are profound and incredibly difficult to deal with, right? Like conduct disorder, which is the
yeah,
precursor to psychopathy, right? That is incredibly rare, but
incredible.
it is true sometimes, right? But very frequently that is not the case. Usually we don't have horses, we have zebras, but we don't have unicorns.
Right.
Um, and usually if we can remember that, like, if we are trying to make a connection versus trying to fix a problem, if we're treating it like it's a problem, then we've already kind of put ourselves at a disadvantage, because then we're trying to fix it instead of like, okay, how can I meet whatever the need is that needs to be met?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that can be very challenging when you have a young child, maybe between ages 0 and 3, where there's very little, they're not
Communication.
verbal.
Yeah.
And even if they are, I mean, some 2-year-olds don't talk all day long, but there's very little processing ability. And if you're, as a parent, come in with the notion of not understanding, and maybe they're manipulative, or being overwhelmed and maybe not sleeping, I think that's where the most support is needed, to really get you on the right path. The rest then is a lot
Mhm.
of work, but the foundations need to be laid in that time.
Yeah. And so, were you aware when you had kids that you were neurodivergent?
Let me think about that. It's been such a journey.
Yeah.
um you know what, I don't think we had the labels in place yet. When our first was born, I just approached it with, you come as you are, and I'll meet you where you're at, and we'll figure it out. And very early on, there were signs where I'm like, that's kind of interesting how you as a person develop. That's not what
Yeah.
an average child would show. But it was always so borderline that when you would take them to
Mm.
the pediatrician, it's like, well, it's fine. And it was,
It's
but it
like
was
on the level of like, yeah, it's sort of how I think about my kids on their growth chart. I have very small children, but they're just barely on the growth chart. Like they're
so,
just
yeah.
barely at the very bottom.
So it was never enough to really be concerned, but I did notice, and I
Yeah.
took note of. And I don't even remember exactly when or how it came up, but I started reading about ADHD, and I'm like, oh, And then, of course, between my husband and I was like, look at this. Guess what? And so, for us, as individuals and as a couple, there were a lot of things that fell into place. I was like, oh, now that makes sense. Now I understand where all this is coming from. And then knowing that it is hereditary,
Yeah.
it made a lot more sense. And then, of course, you go down with your kids, but then you go up. And my brother had already had a diagnosis, so we weren't completely surprised. But with that extra knowledge, it was like, oh, look, this person and that person, and it makes so much sense. And
It does. It starts connecting all of the
yeah,
dots together.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm still surprised that these days, when kids come in to get a diagnosis, that they don't
Hmm.
automatically give forms to the parents and say, okay, where's this coming from and how can we support you as parents? Because the likelihood of one or both of you being on the spectrum and having ADHD or something going on at the same time is so high.
Mm-hmm.
But if you live in that bubble, it's like, oh, well, that's normal. Uncle so-and-so always was that way. And of course,
Yep.
everybody has a little bit of it. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
actually, it's just
They
everybody's
don't.
family. And the
Yes.
family culture now looks like that, but it actually is more than that. So it's a fun journey with official or non-official. There's so much information out there, just understanding and connecting the dots, which in the end for us led just to more grace. And every so often there's like a little cue that we would take, and it's like, hey, why don't you try approaching something from this angle, or try this strategy. But if you're creative and understanding, a lot of the strategies come anyways.
Yeah.
I would never go in saying you need to read so you can learn how. I mean, it's nice to get some tips and tricks, but the bigger thing is just so much grace and so much patience, just to understand you're good.
Yeah.
You're good. This is
It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine eventually. Even if it is really hard right now, it will be fine eventually, and we will figure it out. That we are capable of figuring it out.
And it is figure outable. Like it's not the end of the world. It's not something that is so broken that it couldn't be fixed. It's not something that needs to be fixed. It's just something that to navigate in whatever strategy works for you and your family.
Yeah. It's so much of this journey is about just self-acceptance and teaching self-acceptance to our kids so that hopefully they have to unlearn a little bit less than we did, or to remind them because I mean, the world around us is constantly reminding us if we don't fit into whatever mold would be easier for other people. And so we have to have that self-acceptance like deep in our bones so that we know even if it's convenient for other people, that doesn't mean that it's something we have to do all the time.
Yeah. And honestly, I still think it's a scam. Like I cannot believe that, let's say you're climbing the corporate ladder and it comes with very strict rules of engagement and expectancies of how to conduct yourself and how much to give, and you cannot tell me that the majority of people involved in that actually do well. I think there are a few, like I'm thinking of like Gary V, like who is like a crazy out there giving active, I don't want brains, thank you very much, person who does thrive in that environment. But I think most people are just kind of caught in it, and they don't know how to get off. They don't know that they have permission to get off, and that as long as they're participating, they're still keeping that system alive. But I honestly don't believe that most of them thrive. I mean, if you look at heart disease and all the diseases, it costs you somewhere. And if it's your body that is telling you, it costs you.
Yeah, I talk a lot about like how I feel like the autistic and ADHD neurodivergent people, we're kind of just the canary in the coal mine. It's that we are so affected by that system that we have no choice often. Like we might get along for a while, but at some point we break. And we have no choice but to get off the escalator, right? Like we have no choice but to find a different way to function, or unfortunately, some of us burn out completely and we end up completely disabled or unable to function even basically. And I mean, it's so many of us end up in addiction and disease that could have possibly been prevented had we had more supports, had we
Mhm.
had more ability to do the things that we need instead of what benefits other people.
Yeah. Even if it just comes down to the things that we need. I don't even know if it's a benefit to other people if we function. I mean, it's uncomfortable. You're right. Like if you have
Yeah.
a kid in class that needs to move and 24 other children are trying
Yeah.
to concentrate, that is inconvenient because the system is set so rigid that there's very little room for that to exist outside of that. But I think the bigger thing really always starts with you recognizing what you need and advocating for it, and
Yeah.
recognizing you have a choice. It might look very different, but more and more, and I think you and I experience that a lot in the entrepreneurial world, we are just creating circumstances that serve us.
Yep.
And that is possible. And it's possible for anyone wanting to create that. And without going into a how, it's allowing yourself to even knocking on that door and say, well, is there something other than that? What else is possible? Because it is, and it should
Yeah.
be. But allowing yourself, giving yourself that permission that, okay, I don't want to participate in this. I do need to pay my bills.
Yep.
What else is possible?
Yeah.
And,
Just
and
opening that possibility, right? Like that is huge.
yeah, exactly. So if you take anything from this, it's what else is possible, because it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. That is so important. This has been just such a wonderful conversation. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on before?
No, I think we touched on a lot of stuff. I think my
Yeah.
favorite points of this is really permission granted to be you, ask what else is possible, and love on your kids from the bottom of your heart, because they want to be loved, and they just
Yeah.
every action is communication.
Yeah. Oh, so I do like to ask what has been your greatest success? What has been your greatest success in raising your kids and
Well,
being a parent?
how do you quantify that, right? Like, how do you, I don't know, greatest success? You want to give me an example of what other people have said so I know what direction to go?
So I mean, personally, like a lot of what we've talked about is like the personal growth and the the changing of mindset, just the ability to meet people where they are. And I love, so I've always loved sociology and human beings. Just I always want to figure out how people work.
Right,
And
right.
so having children is a great opportunity to find out how people work and why they're not doing the things that I wish they would do. Um, so it's been a really great area to learn acceptance and learn flexibility, even when that is really hard. And the greatest success with my kids, especially, is um, leaning into their needs and listening to them, and then like letting them know that it's okay, even we will figure it out and it will be okay. And your needs are your needs. Like they don't change based on like what else is going around you. Your needs are your needs, and that's it.
Yeah. And it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I agree with you on that. I think because my kids are a little older,
Yeah.
one of the things I'm truly, truly grateful for is that my kids like to be around me. So they're all
Yeah.
teenagers now. Well, the 12-year-old is a tween, but they're all in that bracket.
Yeah.
And yes, they spend a lot of time in their room, and yes, they close the door, and they do the teenage
Yeah.
regular thing. But when it comes down to it, they still like to spend time with me. They Like our oldest would come in the office and just sit down, and I would look at my screen and he would look at his screen, and we would talk, we would have conversations, and that goes all the way down to all of them. They like to come and share with me. They like to hang out most of the time,
Yeah.
And they do, to a good degree, like to be with each other. And I think that, to me, that reflects that we've done something right. Because everything else can be learned. Whatever skill they don't know yet, whatever grade they didn't get in school, I know if they're motivated to do something, they can catch up on that. But the interpersonal safety that they feel and that they display now that they're teenagers and beyond, that is something that is so much harder to learn as an adult if you choose to. And they get to have that from the get-go. And I can see it and other people can see it. So to me, that is very, very precious.
That's such a gift. Yeah, that's like the biggest gift I feel like we can give kids is the ability to self-regulate, to interact with people not from a reactive state, but a responsive state.
Mhm.
And yeah, I agree too with when we are, especially like you mentioned with academics being so pushed, that is a lot of the pushback that we tend to receive with homeschool, right? Is that, well, what if they don't learn enough? What if they don't? Okay, well, they weren't really learning in public school because they were constantly dysregulated. A dysregulated child cannot learn very well. A reactive child cannot learn. A reactive person can't learn. So it does no good to be in school with heavy academics if you are constantly dysregulated.
Yeah.
None of that matters.
And it
And
doesn't.
go
I
ahead.
mean, yeah, no, I'm thinking of like, why do we push it so hard that your 3-year-old, needs to know the alphabet and be able to read so they can then go to Harvard and Stanford? Really, like, how many people
Yeah.
paid for that path? One of my nieces
Yeah.
is like, she's doing the doctorate at Stanford, whatever. And
Sure.
that's amazing. But
For
most,
her.
for her, exactly. But most of my kids are just not in that realm. And that's also okay. Like,
Hmm.
to be happy, is not dependent on a degree. And that one was a big unlearning for me because I
Yeah.
did well in school. I loved school. None of my kids do. Like, I don't even
Yeah.
understand. So far out of my normal.
Yeah.
But okay, then they'll figure out whatever
What they
they,
do want to do.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
and I want them to know that they can that learn. My biggest lesson with a school for my kids is that learning is not a thing that ends. Learning is not something that ends at the end of high school, at the end of college. You, I want them to want to learn about whatever it is they want to learn about. Because I think that that is also kind of just how autistic and ADHD people exist. Like it's really hard for us to care about things that we don't care about. And to learn things that we don't care about is just mind-numbingly boring. But if you give me like a baking textbook, I will read that thing cover to cover. If you give
and
me
remember.
yeah, and remember all of it easily instead of trying to cram information into my brain that doesn't want to be there.
Yeah. So interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
we could get, and that's definitely another conversation, but the whole school system,
Yeah.
how it still functions, is just so adequate and not helpful for normal children, let alone for neurodiverse children. But let's not open that.
It's a it's a whole other conversation. It could
Oh,
be at least an hour just on that.
just on that. So we're not going
Yeah.
there. But I'm glad you found something that works for your children at this point of time.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what
And I mean,
matters.
even when they're in public school, I think like I have a friend who um tells her kids all the time, I don't care what grades you make. Like I don't care. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter if you are passing, perfect, amazing. If you're not passing, we will figure out what we can do to get you to pass, but that's literally all that matters. Like,
Yeah,
you,
I actually had to tell one of my children now, it's like, I know this assignment you're not able to do. We tried, we worked on it,
yeah,
it's not happening, and you know what? It's not happening. It's
yeah,
it's just what it is, and I had to be fine with it. I had to, so I could tell him, you're okay with it. Still in conversation with a teacher about that.
yeah.
But
That's the trying to get them on board is sometimes more effort.
and I feel for them because they're
Yeah,
about, I have to put something on your on the
yeah,
on the paper. I have to write something, and all I
yeah,
can write is it didn't, there was nothing there. And I'm like, you know what, you write what you need to write.
yeah,
And he's young enough that it is so inconsequential. I'm not going to push him,
yeah,
and just trust that as he grows, he'll get his way. And but
yeah,
that was a learning curve for me first, so I can then extend that to him, and then let alone the outer world. But I don't want to keep
yeah.
you. It's been really
Oh,
fun
but yeah,
talking.
yeah, just trusting that kids are going to be okay eventually is like one of the most important lessons for me personally. And yeah, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, it's been my
I'm
pleasure. Had a good time.
I'm so glad we got to talk. Was there anything you have a personal practice if you want to put that information out there?
Yeah, I am building a community right now. Like literally just, well, not just, there's never a just, right? I'm inviting moms, and if you're an ADHD mom, even more so, I'm desiring to create a space where you can just be. Yes, it's about tips and tricks. Yes, I will teach about self-care, all that. But I think, especially in the world these days, we need a place where we can just get to know each other, where we can
Yeah,
know that it's not just a name, it's not just an echo chamber. I was so amazed how sometimes we use these groups as like, oh, help me solve this problem, and I have these random people, these internet strangers, talking to the most intimate things of my life, and I'm like, what has happened to this world that is what we need? And I think we all need
yeah,
connection. There's a huge
yeah,
component of mental health that has to do with community and with knowing people and being with people.
yeah,
Would it be awesome to have that in person someday? Yes. Am I there yet? No. So I'm creating it online. It is off Facebook, so it's not going to get lost. You do have to be intentional going there, but
yeah,
the idea is that there'll be people there you recognize, that know you, and where we can have that bubble where we can support,
yeah,
and where you can ask, hey, is this okay? Can I really run my dishwasher twice? Can I have a pile of crap on my dining room table and living there?
yeah,
Those kind of things where we can learn that you are not too much, you are
yes,
okay. So I would love, and it's a free community, so I'd be happy to
yeah,
welcome more of you into that.
yeah. We can definitely add that information down below, and we will, yeah, like finding our people, finding our community is profoundly helpful in just surviving some days, just surviving, let
Yeah,
alone thriving. It's really awesome for thriving too.
sometimes it is, and that's where it starts. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for being here today. This was delightful.
Same here. Thank you so much for providing the space. And I hope that people will take nuggets from it and take it with them.
Absolutely.
This has been an episode of the Neurodivergent Parenting Podcast with Melissa Cox. We are part of the Neurodiversity Media Network. You can find the Neurodiversity Media Network on YouTube and anywhere that podcasts are. You can find Melissa Cox on Facebook at Melissa Cox, Blue Sky at melissa-cox.bsky.social, on TikTok and Instagram at living_with_disaster. And you can always catch us right here again for the next episode. Thanks for joining us.